I'm Anne-Marie Fannon, and I'm the director of the Work Learn Institute at the University of Waterloo. There'll be time for Q&A closer to the end of the presentation today. If you do have any questions for us as we work through the presentation, please feel free to pop those into the chat on the right-hand side of your hop-in window. We'll do our best to cover as many questions as possible, including the ones that were submitted in advance of today's session. Before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm presenting to you today from the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples, and I respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders past and present. The University of Waterloo's main campus is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 10 kilometers on each side of the Grand River. As we come together today while staying apart, we're gathering on other traditional lands across our country. I acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we all share these lands today. Many of you are quite familiar with Waterloo, and this slide just highlights some of what make our university and our co-op programs unique. We were the first post-secondary institution in Canada to offer the cooperative model of education, and we now run the world's largest program of its kind, with over 25,000 students working in a global network with over 7,500 employers. And of course, Waterloo is home to the Work Learn Institute. The Work Learn Institute establishes and promotes quality standards for work-integrated learning, conducts research and shares it, and explores new models and approaches to talent development. We're pleased to be the host of this Future Ready Workforce series, and we've already covered some great content since the series started in February of this year. Of course, this is our last event in our 2021 series, and we look forward to sharing our future plans with you soon. I'd really like to quickly recap some of the takeaways from our previous 3 sessions. So our first session focused on recruiting next-gen talent. Takeaways included the importance of building a diverse and inclusive workplace, openly sharing your culture, your values, and your work with potential applicants, and reimagining your ideal candidate. Our second session was focused on engaging next-gen talent with takeaways on the importance of building and maintaining strong relationships with that talent, enabling their contributions to meaningful work, and providing time for next-gen talent to innovate. Our most recent session was focused on converting and retaining next-gen talent with takeaways on the importance of using work-integrated learning to build your talent pipeline. Once again, promoting your company's values and culture, and offering time for next-gen talent to develop their skills. If you're interested in revisiting the content from any of these sessions, we'll pop a link into the chat so you can access the recordings. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the speakers joining me today. First, we have Peter Tulamello, the National Leader for Learning Advisory and Ecosystems at Deloitte. Peter works with Canada's largest employers in advising on the future of work and learning, including better understanding what skills and capabilities our workers need to thrive in the future of work, and what learning approaches are most effective in growing and developing those skills within our workforce. We also have Kavir Gopal. Kavir is a third-year mechatronics engineering student at the University of Waterloo, and he's worked in upskilling students for his past 2 co-op work terms. Most recently, he served as a team lead in the newly established Waterloo Experience, or We Accelerate program, which focuses on developing future-ready skill sets for first work term co-op students, making them more employable and agile for future opportunities. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today. So today's session is really going to focus on strategies for ensuring that your teams are future ready by identifying future ready skills, upskilling your talent to enable their professional and career development, and rethinking how we deliver our training programs to prepare our teams for the future of work. Let's start by identifying future-ready skills. So before we can really prepare our teams for the future of work, it's helpful to understand some of the key skills that we think workers will need to navigate and to thrive in the future of work. We'd like to share a few examples of the work that we're doing at Waterloo to support student development in future-ready skills before turning things over to our guest speakers to get their perspectives. So first, let's take a look at the top skills that our employers are currently seeking. And we're hoping that you can join in this conversation as well by sharing some of the top skills that you're looking for in new candidates and putting your comments into the chat. So what you see in front of you is an analysis of over 74,000 job postings between winter 2017 and fall 2020 that identifies the most in-demand skills sought by our co-op employers. As predicted, we're already seeing a heightened focus on those uniquely human skills and capabilities, particularly when they're paired with some of those in-demand technical skills such as software development, data analysis, and machine learning. Of course, these data allow us to see the skills that are in demand today, but to better support our students in preparing for the future of work, starting in 2018, we undertook a large research project to identify and validate the key competencies that we expect to be critical for success in the future of work. We started with a review of the existing literature of the future of work, an analysis of numerous existing competency frameworks, and extensive consultation with our students, our faculty, and our employers to create what we call our FutureReady Talent Framework. The FutureReady Talent Framework identifies 12 specific competencies for the future of work that are divided into 4 clusters. So first we have expanding and transferring expertise, and this cluster includes the competencies of discipline and context-specific skills, which really represent the foundational knowledge that we all need to do our jobs. It also includes the competencies of information and data literacy, and technological agility, which represents not just proficiency with a specific software, but comfort in learning and applying new technologies. Next, we have a cluster that focuses on developing self, and it includes the competencies of self-management, which references emotional intelligence and resilience. It also includes the competency of self-assessment, being able to identify one's strengths and one's areas for development. And it includes the competencies of lifelong learning and career development. Next, as has always been critical in the workplace, we have a cluster that focuses on building relationships, and it includes the competencies of communication, collaboration, and intercultural effectiveness. And last but not least, we have a cluster that focuses on designing and delivering solutions, and it includes the competencies of an innovation mindset, critical thinking, and implementation. That is the ability to move from concept into execution. At Waterloo, we're working to provide our students with opportunities to develop, assess, and articulate all of these competencies through the completion of their academic studies and their work integrated learning experiences like their co-op work terms. As we think about how to prepare students for the future of work, I'd like to turn things over to Peter to learn more about Deloitte's work in identifying future-ready skills.
Thanks, Anne, and appreciate that introduction. This is a topic I think that continues to raise in importance within an organization. Certainly, a lot of the employers and organizations in Canada that Deloitte works with have really started to emphasize the importance of better understanding what those future-ready skills are and how they can go about building them. One thing's certain, though, and that's I think a reality that there's really no, or what we're seeing in certain organizations, that there's really no one-size-fits-all number of skills or specific skills that every employee needs to build. And more and more, I think that really comes to bear when you think about, or when you take a step back and think about why certain skills are so important within an organization. In particular, this reality of digital transformation that we're living in, and the fact that you see the prevalence of large systems and softwares taking hold in competitors across different industries. You see our largest employers in the banks and in the resources sector really adopting a lot of the same platforms, a lot of the same systems. And so what used to be a reality in the world of work, where you would compete about the tools that you're adopting, your processes that you're putting in, really we're seeing sort of a convergence of those across employers. And so in a world where that happens, where you can really drive a competitive edge over your competitors really comes down to your workforce and your workforce's capability to deliver on higher outcomes, on more efficient work effort, on higher value tasks that they're doing in day to day. And a lot of this really comes down to a combination of things. Certainly those specific technical skills, and that you had mentioned, and for sure, and certainly we are seeing trends in some of these skills. I've included a few of them on the screen for you here. Certainly agile methodologies, both we talk about both capital A agile being the project management methodology, but also little a agile in the sense of working with agility and adaptability within your day-to-day. We're also seeing an influx in cyber skills, cybersecurity skills in particular, both within the public sector, but other organizations and other industries as well too. And certainly, and I think we saw it on your heat map or your word cloud, and data and analysis and AI and artificial intelligence, machine learning. These are very much in demand skills that we're seeing in organizations across Canada right now. And finally, one that is quite important, I think, for the work that Deloitte does, but also more and more, our clients and our collaborators within industry is human-centered design, which is really a problem-solving methodology that relies heavily on taking a human-centric or user-centric understanding to the needs of employees or humans or customers, and putting those front and center in to any solution that we may be considering for them. Now, while the skills and the specific skills are very important to look at and understand and create strategies around how we bring them into an organization, what is equally or debatably even more important is thinking about what we refer to as enduring human capabilities. And some folks used to use the word human skills, professional skills, soft skills. I'm not a huge fan of those nomenclatures myself, because I think they dilute what they are and the value they bring. But these are becoming more and more critical in the workforce, mainly because of a few factors. One being that if you look at some of the skill lists that we have and what becomes important, the new technologies that are coming and going day in, day in, the actual half-life of those skills and the value that an organization gets out of those skills continues to drop. I think the last research that I saw was the typical half-life of a technical skill now is 3 to 3.5 years. And so what becomes more important is, how are you building the capacity and the capability for resiliency in your workforce? And that's where these enduring human capabilities come in. And so you see a few of these examples on the screen in front of you. Curiosity, empathy. How are we building the ability for our teams to collaborate and think critically, leverage their creativity and their natural imagination to help solve problems, do work differently, evolve their practices, and so forth. And so if I leave you with one message around this future-ready skills or the future-ready workforce, I really think it's that yes, you need to determine an appropriate strategy for what those skills are, how you're going to identify the specific critical future skills for your organization. And it needs to be linked and aligned to the specific strategies and transformations and in how you're evolving your most critical objectives within the business. But also pay attention to and think about how you're bringing in and targeting the development of these enduring human capabilities, because that's what's going to serve you in the long run. If the ROI or the value you get out of a technical skill is 3 years, these enduring capabilities are going to be much longer lasting, and the value and the return that you get on them is going to be much longer and more valuable in the long run. So, Anne, I'll throw it back to you there, but thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. And just in looking at our chat, we've certainly seen some of those enduring human capabilities as exactly what our employers are looking for. So we saw flexibility and resilience listed, as well as some of those in-demand technical skills. Now I'd like to invite Kavir to join us. And Kavir, can you share some examples as to how your academic and your work term experiences have enabled you to build those future-ready skills?
Great. First of all, thanks for having me here, and it's absolutely a pleasure. So there's two perspectives. First, academics, and second, work experiences. Now, academics in general for me has been where I've been able to form my foundational knowledge, the basics of engineering concepts as an engineering student, to learn those basic technical skills like, for example, how to code. Now, for work, what work has really enabled me to do was gain practical and hands-on experiences. It allowed me to make mistakes, establish competencies, and figure out what specifically I like most. So as I mentioned before, in terms of the academics, I learned how to code. Now, knowing how to code previously is what gave me the opportunity in work to now learn how to collaborate and code, use different technologies like Git, which is something I would not have previously had the opportunity to do in academics. Now, what work has also allowed me to do was build valuable non-technical skills. These, to me, I think really epitomizes the value of future-ready skills because it's applicable to every job. While technical skills are specific to one job or the other, future-ready skills are applicable to every single job you see. Now, and some fine examples would be cross-cultural communication, conflict resolution, and working in teams. Particularly, most recently, working in remote environments. I think it's very, very important that we learn these things, and that is something that work experiences has been able to teach me, and it's out of the realm of academics. Now, in terms of how developing future-ready skills has impacted my future job searches and employability, I've seen an exponential impact. From being in first year to having one interview in my first co-op to then being able to choose amongst offers by my third and fourth co-op, I think this change has really been made by the skills I've learned along the way, both from academics and work experiences, and the quality of work that you do when you go to other co-ops, because now you can develop your expertise, whether it's new coding languages, experience with designing industry best practices, or even agile methodologies as we've been talking about. These things, when you really reflect it on your resume, they tend to align with the things that employers are looking for, and it's posted in job descriptions. Thank you. Back to you, Anne.
So much, Kavir. We really appreciate you sharing those examples with us. Now let's move to the subject of upskilling talent to enable professional and career development. As many of you know and will be experiencing right now, it's important for us to think about the ways in which we need to upskill our existing workforce to help them navigate the future of work. Once again, we'd like to get your input on this question and are hoping you can pop into the chat what types of upskilling programs you might be currently offering to your teams. As you enter your responses to that question, let's take a minute or two to look at some of the expected trends of the future of work. So climate change, globalization, technological advancements and disruption, shifting economic and political landscapes, aging populations, particularly here in Canada, social and economic divides have led us to a term that some of you may be familiar with, a VUCA world, one that is complex, uncertain, ambiguous, and volatile. We were talking about the VUCA world before the pandemic, but COVID-19 thrust us directly into these conditions, highlighting a greater need to adapt and prepare in order to sustain and succeed. In order to further illustrate this point, let's take a look at some of the key themes we expect to see in the future of work. WorkLearn recently did a review of the literature associated with the future of work to identify some of the key trends that we expect to grow for the future workplace. First, as has already been identified, advances in technology are expected to significantly disrupt existing roles, tasks, and processes across all organizations and industries. Skill agility and transferability refers to the need to be able to apply our skills in diverse and flexible ways. As our audience has already identified, taking competencies from one role or process or even industry and being able to apply those competencies in a new context. Responsibility for adaptation really refers to lifelong learning. There will be a significant responsibility for individual employees to be lifelong learners, to keep their skills current. But of course, this needs to be a shared responsibility between industry, educational institutions, and government if we're to keep Canada's workforce competitive. And this is something that we'll explore further in this webinar. Fostering equity, diversity, and inclusion. This refers to increasing labor force participation among traditionally underrepresented groups, increasing the labor supply through immigration, and most importantly, building inclusive workplaces that allow our diverse employees to thrive. The gig economy and precarious work is expected to grow as we see more and more positions that are task-based and time-limited. And employee versus organizational values. This is something that we've already highlighted in some of our previous WorkLearn webinars, and that has been really brought to the forefront with the Great Resignation, ensuring that as organizations, we support the well-being of our employees and that we live our values, particularly as they refer to social responsibility. And now I'd like to turn things back over to Peter. Peter, can you share some of your thoughts on the types of upskilling and professional development programs we might need to be thinking about for our workforce to prepare them for these conditions?
Absolutely, and thanks for that. I think this is a really important question for a lot of organizations in Canada right now, and I think what you just shared, Anne, around this reality of the future of work and these key themes that are happening and currently going on with the VUCA world as you describe it, all these advances of technology, the way we're shifting our work models themselves, hybrid models, this shift of task-based work and allocation to a gig economy and precarious work. All that happens in a world where our HR departments, our learning departments really need to support. If you think about their function as an their role within an organization, it's primarily to support career development and skill development, ensuring that those skills are the right ones for what that future of work is coming for the organization. And the reality of what's happening with these teams right now is like a constant bombardment or an influx of learning and training requirements across the organization. So much, I've worked with several of our largest organizations, our largest employers, and they're completely bombarded with so much training and learning requirements that it's almost impossible to keep up. And so this presents a huge challenge, because for the last 20 years, 30 years, our learning departments, our training teams have been set up to respond to a training need in a very traditional, or what I refer to as a linear fashion, right? We would intake on a training need or a training requirement. We would analyze the the need to determine what skills or what program we would require. We'd design it, we'd develop it, we'd implement it, and we'd evaluate it. And this works. This works in a model where we can anticipate the volume of training needs and learning needs that are coming down. But what we've just described about this future of work means we can't anticipate that any longer, right? The skills half-life is too short. You have different things lighting up within our organizations that are completely changing the pace at which we need to upskill workers. And so what we really need is a different approach. We need an approach that is more exponential in nature, one that can address this mass volume and flex and adapt to be able to deliver upskilling at scale. And one of those ways that we like to talk about it in the work that we do is to think about it as we have a framework called the 4E's model. And what that really says is, how can we think about learning on a more holistic way? Our first E in the model is really around the traditional, the education, the formal learning components. And while it's very difficult for us to keep pace with all of those requirements using this approach, what we need to be able to do is to think about which learning and training requirements are most critical, where you would want to apply that type of model to, where you want some of your virtual, your digital learning, you want your academies of learning, you want to access programs from a broader ecosystem with our higher education institutes, with learning providers, so on and so forth. So formal education is still important. But what we're starting to see organizations adopt are some of these other E's. The first being learning through experience. And again, this is not a new concept. What we really want to do is, how do we emphasize and validate that the work that an employee is doing in and of itself is an opportunity for learning. And so how do we reflect on that? How do we shape an environment of learning around that, so that the work that someone is doing, we're using it as an opportunity to stretch, to push, to move, and to validate from that. We also talk about the work environment itself. And so this work environment changes now in our future of work, in our next normal, where we're no longer always within the office anymore. We're in a mobile environment, we're in a hybrid environment. So our workspace, what an employee does, where they do their work, needs to shift as well too. And so how do we bring learning into that environment, whether that's the systems that we use, the tools that we use, our day-to-day meetings? How do we take advantage of that and bring that in? The fourth E in this model is what we refer to as exposure. And this is about creating networks in a community around learning. And so at its most basic, you can think about how you leverage informal or formal mentorships within your organization, coaching programs, peer-to-peer connections, access to individuals that might have that information or that content that someone needs in that point of time. And so the more and more as we evolve this world, as we evolve our understanding of how we can deliver on these exponential requirements, the more we see the adoption of these new ways of learning, which are not so new, to be honest with you, but really emphasizing them. There's a few examples that I'm not going to get into too much, but what I wanted to share is that organizations are adopting these. They've done it in the past, and they have that ability to do so. And so there's two examples that you see on the screen of where an organization that I've seen do it well. But what I want to say is, look at how you're taking advantage of these. Look at where you can apply them within your upskilling requirements, and think about not always relying on the formal side of it, adopting more of your 70-20-10 methodologies and frameworks, thinking about pulling on exposure, environment, and experience a little bit more. So I'll leave it at that and send it back to you, Anne.
Thanks so much, Peter. Kavir, we've just heard from Peter on the ways in which organizations might need to rethink their training and development strategies. But we've also discussed that in the future of work, there's going to be significant responsibility for us to take on our own skill development. So can you share some of the ways that you've tried to keep your own skills current?
Yeah, most definitely. So, you've mentioned that advancement in technology is a key theme in the future of work. Now, the reality of the situation is that education is pretty standard. Peter mentioned that it is the foundation, and I agree, but it's standard, and the work-related technologies evolve. So, with that being said, I know from my experiences that I need to keep my skills correct. So what I've typically done is try to seek co-op jobs where I have roughly 75 to 80% of the skills. Now, this allows me to really learn without compromising the quality of work I do. And now this again relates to another key theme in the future of work, which is transferability and skills agility. So just to give you some examples about that, I am an aspiring product slash project manager. So what I have done in work in terms of transferability and skills agility is that if I'm in a software role, because I'm working in an agile environment, I volunteer to take on some PM tasks. And this really had allowed me to find my interests and explore different avenues in work. Now, this is pretty much a work example. But outside of that, when we look at more the academic side, I've participated in hackathons, and most recently, just last weekend, I participated in Waterloo engineering competition. Now, these co-curricular events, in fact, really allow you to build new skills and new competencies in such a short space of time. Especially when you think about hackathons, there are a bunch of sponsors, and if you really want to stand a good chance of winning, it's recommended that you use one of those technologies by one of those sponsors. So it challenges you to go outside of your comfort zone, pick up a new skill in a short space of time, and really explore something. And you'll be surprised. A lot of times I've found that these skills were something that I was able to use later on. Now, employees and employers work hand in hand to get the job done. And employers have offered specialized skills training to me in several ways. Most recently, in my experience as a team lead in the We Accelerate program, we did training called Personality Dimensions. Now, this has been primarily focused around effective teamwork, even in remote workforces. Now, everyone talks about making your skills current, but it's not only technical skills that you need to make current. I think you need to make a lot of your non-technical skills current, and this is why I think Personality Dimensions was one of the best specialized training that an employer has offered to me. Now, also, again, with We Accelerate and working with Manulife, I was able to learn web application design training. This primarily focused on a coding bootcamp where I was able to build on the skills that I had, and then practice that in a hackathon style team where I can, explore opportunities and really dive deeper into the knowledge that I know and challenge myself. And lastly, one more example I want to touch on was the opportunity I had at one of my previous co-ops at IKEA Industries to learn coding. And not just coding, but VBA, Visual Basics, which is Excel coding. Now, this structure was a little bit different because the employer did not have something set up and structured for me. This was a free time project where I took the initiative to do something when I felt that it was a more feasible way to get it done, a more efficient way. And my boss said, you know what, go ahead. And the thing is, I had the time to really explore, figure it out, troubleshoot, learn the skill, and it turns out there was a double benefit to it. I learned a new skill and I've developed a tool that to this day that employers still use. So all in all, just to sum up, there's a different structure that each employer takes for upskilling their employees, and it's unique to the organization. But the opportunity to really, build your skills while working with different companies is there. Thank you, Anne. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Kavir. So I'd like to build upon some of what Peter and Kavir have already shared and to move to the topic of how we might rethink our training programs to prepare our teams for the future of work. What's become increasingly apparent is that in order for us to meet the upskilling demands of the future of work, we're going to have to think critically and deeply about the ways in which we train our staff. What worked in the past simply will not be agile enough to adapt to the rate of change. And as mentioned by Peter and referenced in our FutureReady Talent framework, we need to think about training and development in a holistic manner, not just training on a specific technology or process, but developing those enduring capabilities within our teams so that they're equipped to navigate the VUCA world. So we're interested in hearing your perspectives on how you might be rethinking training, and invite you once again to put comments into the chat. As you do that, we'd like to share one example of how we thought about training and development of our students a little bit differently, both in response to a long-standing challenge, which is helping students get that first co-op job, and directly in response to some of the impacts brought by COVID-19, specifically as they pertain to student employment. So in spring of 2021, this year, we had a large cohort of first work term students, and we knew that many of them were going to struggle to get that first co-op job, in particular because the number of job postings was just down as a result of COVID-19. So in response to this challenge, we conceptualized a program that we've referenced a few times today, the Waterloo Experience, or We Accelerate program. We Accelerate's primary goal is to upwardly accelerate students from unemployment to meaningful employment in subsequent work terms using work-integrated learning. And while we developed this program for our students, we're sharing it with you today because it's a model that reflects some of these future-ready needs that we've discussed already in the webinar today, specifically thinking about not only how we can help our learners develop those in-demand technical skills, such as web development, cloud computing, or human-centered design, but at the same time, it really helped our learners develop some of those enduring human capabilities, such as problem solving, collaboration, and intercultural skills. So let's take a quick look at the model so you can better understand how it worked. We started by identifying the most in-demand skills that our employers were seeking, as identified in that word cloud that I showed you earlier in the presentation. Then we reached out to our strategic partners who had training materials in those areas, such as Deloitte, Microsoft, Manulife, and others. And we asked them if they might be willing to share and adapt those training materials for our first work term students. As the students worked through the content, they were given an opportunity to apply their new skills working in interdisciplinary teams on a real-world project that had been supplied by our employers. They also had mentorship and guidance as they worked through the projects, which really allowed them to move beyond training and just knowledge development to really enhancing their skills and developing them. Of course, because these were our first work term students and we want them to be able to articulate the skills that they've developed through participation in the program, we also provided career development supports at the beginning and the end of the experience for the students. And what this allowed us to do, We Accelerate allowed us to take over 500 first work term students who had little to no experience in these in-demand skills, and to really quickly allow the students to develop and apply those skills while simultaneously building their interpersonal skills and holistically developing them so they're better prepared for their next work experience. And Deloitte was one of our partners in We Accelerate. And so to dive a little bit deeper into how we might use this notion of work-integrated learning to rethink our training programs, I'd like to turn things over to Peter again.
Thanks again, Anne. And I think this is a really important conversation to have and to be thinking about here. And the reason I think that is, what the World Economic Forum kind of coined as a skills emergency a few years ago, pre-COVID really has changed quite a bit in the last year, and into you might hear terms like the Great Resignation, you might hear this shift in this future of work, but what that does to an employer or an organization such as Deloitte is that it really puts us in not just a skills emergency, but it also puts us in almost like a talent emergency. And when you think about bringing those skills in, as I mentioned off the top, this really being, kind of one of the final frontiers for competition or for being competitive with other organizations within your industry, being that workforce and those skills that you have. What becomes super critical is accessing those skills, is accessing those talent, and how do you do that in a way that brings them into your workforce in an accelerated path, such as what we're talking about here with work integrated learning co-ops, but time to proficiency as well too. And I think that's where this approach of work integrated learning really drives the most value for an organization. And our experience with the We Accelerate Co-op was very exciting, and one that we're really happy to have been a part of. What it allowed us to do was really start to tap into some of these new sources of talent. And what I mean by that is creating relationships with students earlier on, and supporting them in the development of not just critical skills or key skills that are important for us as an employer and an organization. In our sense, we wanted to develop some human-centered design skills within students, but also put those students in an environment of work that is very typical of Deloitte. And so working with a partner such as the University of Waterloo and creating this type of work integrated learning co-op allowed us to do that. And so to describe what was done is we took I think 6 or 7 or 8 different teams of students. We wanted to put them into teams because work very much in the future now is collaborative in nature. And so we wanted to replicate that environment for those students. And what we did was we went through not a separation of learning and education and skills development and then go apply it on a problem, but actually, how do you do that alongside each other? And so in this case, what the students did was they would pick up the first step in the process in human-centered design methodology, and then they would go and they would immediately apply that week. So week over week, the students are learning not just the methodology and applying it, but because we put them in pods and in teams, they also need to flex on those enduring human capabilities. They need to figure out how to team together. They need to collaborate to solve the problem. They need to develop and work together, and doing all of that in a real work environment. And I think that's what the beauty is. And so if I'll leave you with another message today, it's really to think about how you start to create and understand that it's not necessarily just the key and critical skills development that you need to be focusing on, but how are you doing that in a way that actually pulls in or creates new pipelines of talent for your organization? And that's, I think, where relationships and programs that higher education institutes are providing, especially in this cooperative work integrated learning, apprenticeships, degree apprenticeships model, I think they are going to be becoming more and more important for us as employers in Canada to understand where they fit within our ecosystem of skill development. And I think that's the important piece, right? Is not to, if I think about that 4E's model, it's thinking about how we can create and structure not just a one-off training, not just a one-off learning, but this ecosystem that allows us to take our most critical business objectives, our transformation strategies, how we're evolving, the new tools that we're doing, and build out multiple pathways for skill development, this ecosystem approach. And a lot of that, I think, really needs to come from things like partnerships with higher education institutes, with other learning providers, collaborations with other organizations, and so forth. So I'm a big advocate for work integrated learning. I think it's something that a lot of organizations should really start to think seriously about adopting if you haven't already. I know a lot of organizations have. Thanks, Anne.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Peter. I'd like to ask Kavir to join us again as one of our team leads in the We Accelerate program. I'm hoping you can just share a little bit on the skills that you developed as a team lead and the ways in which you saw the students develop their skills throughout the program.
Oh, definitely. So just to give a little bit of background, I worked in the stream in partnership with Manulife. So, and I'm still reminiscing this experience because We Accelerate was such an impactful program. Now, in terms of the skills that I've learned from a technical perspective, I was able to build experience and competencies with web dev tools and technologies. Some of these things I knew before, but there was room to learn more technologies. For example, GraphQL was something I did not know, but I knew the basic foundations of just JavaScript, REST, React, all those features that is, the main parts of modern web application design. Now, from a non-technical perspective, I was able to see the value of work, the impact really of upskilling on other students. While I myself would have been upskilled and have been upskilling myself from first co-op all the way to third and fourth, being an upper year student, seeing how first years, how tremendously they were upskilled over this co-op experience really, really stood out to me. Outside of that, still in terms of non-technical, there were a lot of career opportunities. There was a lot of opportunities for me to really showcase the quality of work I was doing, but not just that, but network with higher people within the university and with our industry partners. Funny enough, this is actually where I met Anne in my experience as a We Accelerate team lead. And not just that, but networking with people at Manulife and working closely with them really allowed me to secure my next co-op there. So for my next co-op, I would be working at Manulife in software development. Now, I've seen how the We Accelerate program has prepped our students for the future because our students have came in here with little to no experience prior to We Accelerate. And this is because the We Accelerate program is something that first year co-ops can opt into after failing to secure a first group. So it's an alternative to a standard work term where they get what we classify as a flexible work credit. Now, upskilling really gave them the opportunity to learn, practice, and build competencies as I've been talking about all along. And I'll agree with Peter. He said that, a lot of these things, these students had to do it in teams. And our stream did the same thing. Students were working in teams and they really got to figure out these things together. And that's relevant to a workplace. Because when you work, you're never working alone. Most times you're working on a project, you're working in teams. You might have one task that you're doing alone, but the entire project is usually part of a team or part of the department's vision. Now, our students here were high achievers. Even though they did not get a first standard work term, they did not let that get in the way of their mindset. They produced exceptional projects because they were really determined to make the best of this experience they had. And I think going through this program as a team lead, I will tell you that to me, this was better than a standard first work term. Because most times in a first work term, students don't really dive as deep into the technical aspects as they would in a third or fourth or even a fifth work term. But here, they really had the opportunity to go as deep as they wanted to, really explore, challenge themselves, and produce something exceptional. And since leaving that program, now coming back to school, I've met many students. I've seen them across campus, I've seen them on the streets of Waterloo, and some of them have even sent me emails saying, hey, we've gotten offers. Thank you so much for the impact that you've had on us. And we've gone back to work for some of the companies and partners that we've worked for in We Accelerator. Now external companies, they're getting way more opportunities than they had in their last recruitment season. So that being said, I just want to leave you with this. If you are a first year student or you know anybody that's a first year student and they're really struggling to land that first co-op, I strongly recommend that you highlight and point out this We Accelerate program to them. It's really an opportunity to grow, make yourself more competent, and stand out going forward from your first into your sixth co-op. Thank you. Back to you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Kuvir. And really just to sort of highlight and synthesize, the reason that we wanted to share this model with you today is because it was taking a group of learners with little to no experience and really helping them develop that skill set quickly, which is what we will need to do continuously with all of our teams. So with that, I'd like to pull a few takeaways together for the audience. Peter and Kuvir, it's been a great discussion, and I know we've just scratched the surface on this very important topic. For takeaways for our audience, we'd like to highlight once again the importance of looking for opportunities to develop those enduring skills and capabilities for your staff to really ensure that they're equipped to navigate that VUCA world. Think about ways in which you can train your talent through experience. So whether that's taking the work integrated learning model and adapting it, or thinking about how training can be done in the flow of work, this can improve your agility and your outcomes. So those authentic opportunities to apply the learning immediately will not only help your employees understand the content that they're learning in a deeper way, but doing so can also help you achieve your business objectives at the same time. And then, as has been mentioned, think about ways in which we can establish partnerships to meet your upskilling and reskilling needs. This absolutely needs to be an ecosystem and a collective effort for us to stay competitive as a country. So that brings us to the end of the formal component of our webinar today, and we'll move directly into questions. We have one question that has come in so far from the audience, and it is, how can an employer know when to bring in new skills versus upskilling existing employees? I think sometimes we weigh the potential skills of an unknown employee as more valuable than the upskilling and adjustment of our existing employees. But how do we know when to choose one or the other? And Peter, can I turn that over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a fantastic question. I think something that might be a miss with a lot of organizations that I've seen. And I think one of the ways that you can address that is actually to think about taking a step back in your approach. And what I mean by that is thinking about not just how you're going to build new skills and who should build those new skills and how you're going to invest in doing that, but think about skills at a higher level. And so we talk about understanding and identifying not just what future skills you need within your workforce. So using that through an assessment of where your organization is going, certain key objectives or strategies, but you also need to understand what your current skill set is. What is your talent marketplace like? And by doing so, what you're going to start to uncover is not only are you going to have huge pockets of skills that you need to build, but if you're thinking about how the skills need to evolve over time within your organization, you're going to have a huge pocket of what we refer to as like nascent skills, right? Ones that may become less and less important over time. And in a proper skills strategy in an organization is looking at both of those sides of the coin. What skills we need to build, and what skills do we have today, and what talent do we have today that transformations, new systems, machine learning, RPA, automation, all these sorts of future work factors are going to impact. And how do we marry those two things to really address our skills challenges? And so that adds a little bit of weight, I think, Laura, to your consideration around putting emphasis on reskilling and understanding how we can transform certain pockets of our workforce to be better positioned in the future of work for delivering on higher value activities. And so it's a great question. I think one that a lot of organizations really need to start thinking about more of.
Great. Thanks so much, Peter. Kavir, I'd like to ask you a question that was submitted in advance, and I think it aligns nicely with this first question that was asked. So the question is, how can an employer determine if someone has the capacity to be upskilled? And what's a realistic jump in skill change or development that can be expected? I'm wondering if from your experience with our first year students, you can speak to what was possible in a short period of time.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. That's actually a really good question. So the reality of the situation is that everyone, no matter what stage of your career, whether you're a student and you're in first co-op or you're a full-time worker, every single person has the capacity to be upskilled. And you would tend to notice, a lot of you would notice, the more you learn and the more you become competent in a particular area, the more you realize there are things that you still don't know. And you accept that. So really, what has worked for me is that when I've selected jobs where I know and I'm comfortable with 70 to 80% of the skills in that job description. So it does give me that let's say 20 to 30% room for flexibility to really learn and grow. And I think that is, from my experiences, that is a safe amount in terms of having 20 to 30% percentage for upskilling is safe because it does not overwhelm you and it allows you to really build on what you have and still learn more without compromising the quality of work that you've done.
Great. Thanks so much, Kavir. I'm going to take just one last question, and it has come in from our audience as well. So the question says, roughly 25% of undergraduates are in the humanities. They're literally spending years developing the durable human skills that our employers want, but they have virtually no access to will because no one can conceive of where they would go in the workforce because they don't have job training. We don't want to turn their classical degrees into job training because it's clear that job training has a short shelf life. So how can we overcome this catch-22 and help these students make a smooth transition to the workforce and help the economy get the talent that it needs? This is another really great question, and one that we've certainly spent a fair bit of time thinking about at the University of Waterloo. Absolutely, we appreciate the incredible, enduring human skills that can be developed through completion of a degree in the humanities. And I think some of the strategies that we've seen that are successful for helping to support students into their first work integrated learning opportunities and then subsequently into the workforce are thinking about taking those very strong, enduring human capabilities and doing two things. First of all, providing a bit of training in some of what those in-demand technical skills are so that your arts graduate or your arts student can say, I have these problem-solving, critical thinking, collaboration skills, and I am also able to provide this technical skill to you. And the second piece really is to help them get to that place. Oftentimes what we have to do with our art students is help them appreciate what skills they have developed. And that means really working with them closely to help them identify how their coursework does indeed lend itself into skill development and helping to give them a language to articulate that to employers. So it's both sort of this combination of a bit of technical training and then really helping them understand how to market their skills that can work to open up opportunities for art students. And they're absolutely needed within our economy and our labor force and bring unique contributions. So with that, we're running short on time now. So I'd like to present some information in case you're interested in staying connected with us. We'll put some information up on the Work Learn Institute's website and social media, as well as Waterloo Co-operative Education. Some of you submitted questions in advance about how you can hire our co-op students or what the hiring cycles look like. If you did so, we'll reach out directly to you with our business development teams to help you work through those logistics. A couple of things to highlight. We do have a newsletter that contains information about our latest research and information about upcoming events. You can sign up for that newsletter by visiting the Work Learn website. There'll also be an option for signing up to that newsletter with the post-event message you receive. And finally, we do have a short survey for you to complete before you leave our keynote today. On the right-hand side of your screen under the Stage tab, select Type Form, and from there hit OK. I've got 1 minute at the bottom to start the survey. Okay, so there are 2 more breakout sessions following this presentation today at 1 and 1:30, where you can dive deeper into the topic of upskilling. At 1 o'clock, we'll host a session further exploring how project-based learning can prepare teams for the future of work. And at 1:30, we'll offer some insights on how to upskill emerging talent and create an engaging work term. So to navigate to those sessions, click on Stages in your left-hand navigation and select the session you're planning to attend. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us once again. Thank you to Peter and Kavir for sharing your insights with our audience today. It's been a great discussion, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.